Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Lychee Basics episode. And today we're talking about delicates and intricate parts. And when I say delicate and intricate, I mean things that have massive amounts of detail. And when I say delicate, I mean things that'll probably break if you drop it on the floor. Well, now that we understand what I'm talking about, let's get straight into the lychee and let's get going with this episode on basics. As always, I like to cut to the chase. And with this particular topic, I think it's important to note that you should never rush through supporting something that's delicate and or intricate. Now, our little snowman friend over here has probably got some dysfunctional issues as well as some definite fragile issues. This little arrow right here, as well as his little spindly arms, definitely will be some cause for concern. So we're going to have to be really careful about how we take care of supporting this one and making sure that the parts that are necessarily going to be fragile, we're not going to over support them so they don't snap when we try to take our supports off. And then we have to make sure that the parts that aren't fragile, like this little round bottom here, are going to get the brunt of our supporting to ensure that we know what we're doing here when we're supporting something delicate. Now, as far as intricates go, this big lady over here, the Frost Giant, is probably one of the more intricate models I've seen in a long time. She's got little daggers, a box full of I don't even know what's happening. I think that's oh wow, it's a dragon's head. My goodness. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on here. She's got some runes carved down the axe handle. There's just a lot, and a lot of it is very intricate in the detail department. So I think it's important to know. I mean, there's even details down here. Here, let's take a look. I mean, even on the inside of the skirt, there's scaling there. So I mean, you have to be mindful of everything. There's the inside of the cape part. Now, and I would not hollow this either. This is too complex of a model to actually do hollowing. The cape is going to cause issues. You're going to wind up putting blockers in there. It's not going to matter. You're not going to save enough material. You can do this in such a way where you don't have to hollow something like this. And we're going to talk about hollowing in another episode this month as well. So you all are going to get some of that as well. That's not a basics episode. That's really just a lesson specific, but it's still going to be something that we do pop out this month at some point. Either that or very close to the beginning of the new year. I do have it planned, as promised. So anyway, back to the topic at hand. So let's take a look at our delicate guy first, the snowman. Mr. Barbarian can wait. He actually doesn't really look very delicate, but he's highly on the intricate side for sure. But we'll take a look at him maybe some other time. Right now, I'm going to focus on our snowman and the frost giant. So let's take a look at him first, and I'll get rid of the giant lady for a second. We'll pop on over to our prepare tab. Now, he's already been lifted 5 millimeters, but I don't necessarily like the orientation because he's kind of sitting directly parallel to the build plate. That's never a good idea. I'm going to tilt him just a little back and a little that way, and then a little bit in this direction like that. So now he's kind of arching in one direction, but he's not sitting parallel to the build plate anymore. His bottom is now at an angle. So let's go take a look, and we can see once we add our raft. Now, again, if you're not entirely sure what I'm doing here, some of this stuff is basic lychee stuff that we covered in episodes 1, 2, and 3. So feel free to go check out those links in the description. I will be sure to post them for you so that way you can get the full effect. Now, if you did follow those episodes, you're already going to know that I'm going to tell you should probably start by creating your raft, setting your initial layer height, which I usually start with 50, and then we do our islands checks from 10 all the way up to 50. But that was covered in a different episode, so I'm not going to go over that again. And then, in fact, really what we're going to cover is the types of supports that you're going to want to use for the different types of body parts, details, and intricate bits. I'm not even going to fully support the entire character, but I'm going to give you an idea of how you'd get the job done starting it. Now, one of the things I always do is I'll usually take a normal set of auto supports set with the primary type of support that I'm going to want to use for a particular model. But because these are minis, I'm going to set the type to my 0.20, which isn't the lightest one I'm using, but it's definitely one of the lower types. And I always set the support density to normal, unless I'm doing something crazy. Experimentation is fun, but not when I'm working on minis. So there we go. The auto supports have set up a decent amount of supports, and yes, some of them are kind of touching some detailed spots, but that's okay, because these are tiny little tips, and they'll be really easy to come off, and you won't notice much damage later on. Now, down here on this bottom, this is definitely not enough coverage to make sure that we can cover the bottom of the snowman. So I'm going to go over to our manual tab and I'm going to do our support projection. Support projection is a tool available in Lychee to plus users. I believe it's a plus user thing. It might not be. It might be a free thing. Where it allows you to preview and then project supports onto entire planes of an object. Check it out. So we're going to choose this bottom plane, and then I'm going to go over to my preview. I'm going to set my offset, and I'm going to set my interval, and then I'm going to choose the type of support I want, and I'm going to add 76 supports. And there we go. Now you can see this has actually done the job that I would have gone in and done myself, but it did a pretty thorough one, in fact. So I'm going to leave that part of it alone. Now, when supporting stuff like this, what I like to do is I'll turn my contact view on over here on the visibility tab, but I'll keep the lines on so it lets me see where my supports are coming from. Now, when we're talking about supporting little tiny stuff like this, the most important part to identify first is to figure out where your most basic islands are. Most people print at 50 microns. So do a simple island run at 50 microns and give yourself an idea of where your islands are so we can focus on supporting those sections first. This is going to help you kind of like figure out where to step from. And then we're going to cover over the different types of supports to use on the different types of body parts. The island detection could take anywhere from a few minutes to, honestly, sometimes for big, tall stuff, it's taken as long as a half an hour, especially at a very, 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 very low layer height where you're making it really thin. And then you're talking about thousands and thousands and thousands of layers. So, yeah, it's going to take Lychee Slicer quite some time to go through all that process. But this little guy shouldn't take more than maybe about 30 to 40 seconds at most. And he seems to be taking a little bit longer than I expected, but that's okay. He'll be done in a second. Great. We have 25 islands that it's discovered. Notice none of them are on the bottom that we filled already with our preview and our support system. That works great. So now we're going to go to our sublight support, which I have set at 0.15, 3.15, and a 1.15 as far as the settings are concerned. Go ahead and pause the video and write that down if you want, because that is pretty much my super light settings that I use on miniatures. Sometimes I'll go to a 0.10, but that's only if something's really, really thin, like the breadth of a hair kind of thin. Now, what I'll do first is I'm going to focus on the center of the island, and I'm going to put one tip there. Then I'm going to add two tips right around the edge of it. Now, since these are super thin and very small, they're not going to cause much pulling, and they'll come away real easy when it's time for me to remove or clip them off. There. Now the arrowhead is safely supported, the arrow tail is safely supported, and I don't have to worry about it breaking when it's time for me to remove it. Great. Let's take a look at the rest of those islands so we can get a better idea of where we need to be. Cool. Right here on the sword, we have an island there. Now, optionally, you can place one bigger support in the middle of some larger islands, but I only recommend this if it's in a spot that you don't really care about. Larger supports on minis are often harder to clean up because they make larger dimples when you either pull them away or snip them away. The smaller supports are easy because in most cases they don't even leave a dimple behind. Now, on stuff like this, like let's say the elbow where it's connected to the rest of the arm, this isn't actually a fragile point. I'm going to switch back to my point 20 and I'm going to place two supports right here on its little joint on the elbow. Over here as well, the arm is a bit thicker than, say, that arrow, so I'm going to use my point 20s and I'm going to create a couple anchor points right here around these islands. I usually add 2 points around each island, and people have often asked me why. No single point of failure. If the first one doesn't make good contact and tries to pull away, and the second one has touched it already, then there's a good chance that not both of them are going to fail. This gives you 2 points of failure every time you have an island come up. This kind of gives you more insurance when it comes time for the print to actually go off, and in most cases, it could save your butt. Now, I don't spread a lot of these supports around, but I'll put them in places where I feel like they're definitely going to be needed. Oh, and don't forget to add extra padding right at the beginning of the print, too. Very important, especially in cases like this where they have a big round underside, because this underside is going to be where a lot of the pulling is going to happen. So you need that to be nice and strong. I would even suggest putting bracings on some of that too, but then it might become too difficult to remove. Sometimes the bracings can make the supports very, very hard. Now, again, you've got a few more islands that you need to support on this. This chunk here is pretty heavy. We can actually go over to a 0.22 because, again, pretty heavy. This is a thick part of the model. It needs a little bit of more support, especially since you can only really fit minis under here. All right, but there we go. There's some supporting there. And now we're going to go up here. Now, this is interesting because up here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a 0.22 there at the very end. And then I'm going to add 1.22 over here at the bottom of this joint in that as well. And over here as well. And then over here as well. We can also place one here. And we can place one there. And that leaves us with 6 more islands, which I'm probably going to use my 20.20 millimeter tip for that, which will fall there, there. Now you'll notice the bigger tips, I did not place 2. The reason for that is because they're large. There's a really, really low chance they're not going to make good contact. But you could go back and then add one lighter one near the heavier one. So for example, if I went back to where I placed the 2.2, like over here, I could place a lighter one near it, and that would allow it to have a little extra support in case it did actually fail or had any kind of technical problems. And again, once you get your island supported, you need to take a look and see if there's any other areas of concern when we're talking about delicate. So here's the finished piece. Now I haven't done any bracings here yet, and we probably need to do a couple more supports up this little stick area, but that's pretty easy to do. You can simply place a couple supports there. And these, again, we're still working with the 0.20. I have not gone up on that, and I have not gone down. I'm also going to place a few more supports here at the back of the sword, just to ensure that it prints properly and does not pancake. Place a few more supports here under that arm, all 0.20s. And then we're going to come over to my structure tab and we'll apply bracings to the model. Now, you would still need to search islands for each layer that you intended on trying to print at, but we've essentially supported all the islands for 50 micron printing for this particular model. He's not done, not really. I mean, I would still do a lot more to this guy before he's finished, but for the most part, you could probably try and print him like this. This is also a good start to a good technique to getting miniatures like this printed and having their delicate parts come out the way you want, not broken and having to glue them back together. Now let's talk about intricate for a little bit. And with Helgra here, we're not going to spend nearly as much time focusing on one particular thing. What I am going to do is I am going to do an island search real quick, but we're going to cut away because this particular one's going to probably take about 20 minutes or so. And then I'm going to come back using the magic of editing, and we'll continue talking about islands, delicates, and intricates. Be right back. All right, here we are. Magic of editing, like I said, amazingly. I'm not surprised by this, by the way. 337 islands. And this is only at 50 microns. If we were to go lower using my usual method, I'm sure we would find she would have probably thousands of islands. And if you look at them, I mean, a lot of them are, it makes sense. They're not massive in most cases, but like this, for example, this little bump would be on its own for quite a while. So, I mean, let's say I were to go, okay, get some decently good ones, a 2 4, and just, all right, boop. You think that'd be okay for just that? No, more than likely not. In situations like this, I like to actually do a more custom setup with my support. So we'll use our 0.22 or sub mediums. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create some trees. To give those tips a little extra power. And these trees aren't going to really do much in the way of like support strain. So they're going to work like that. Now another way you can do it, using trees. We can do it like this, where we take one tip like this, and, and again, those would act like extra supports. And then you could place the additional ones around the outside. Keep that supported. Now this is the underside, so we don't care so much. Now this island is decent. Look at the size of that. That's a big one. So here, because this is a big model, I'm actually going to place one that is 0.28. Then I'm going to put one mini going from there to there. And that should actually keep that pretty good. We go out a ring. Oh. And place a couple additional ones there just to support the palm of the hand. And that's a good way to set up that type of supporting. Now, I haven't done a lot of models this intricate in a while. And honestly, every time I do, I probably will sit here for well over an hour messing with it, putting them where I need them to be, going over each layer one at a time. Because when it comes to minis like this, they're so intricate that it is important to do each and every one of these islands by hand. And I know that sounds like a very tedious job, but if you want the print to look good, I think it is extremely important. And I stress this: you must take your time to do this part of the process. There's no shortcut here. Um, you can press this little add all supports islands, but unless you know exactly where each one is going and what size they are, each island is a different size. They're different. They have different needs. I mean, look at this for example. These little segments are technically separate, and if you put one support here, it's not really going to do its job. You technically need to support this part, and that part in order to really get it the way that it needs to be properly to support that area. So again, it's all about looking at the area, taking a look and seeing how it's there. Like, what's there? Like, what are you actually supporting? Okay, and then you go, all right, cool, got this. Put a support there, And again, Make use of those trees. Make use of those mini supports coupling with the bigger supports. They can be just as strong from this short distance, and they can act like an anchor. It's a really good way to add extra stability. And the way you do that is by holding Alt and Control. So once you have a support placed, you can hit Alt and Control and then drag the support to the original stem. You can then hold Alt and Shift, which will then duplicate that mini support into however you want to fan that out. Now, I've done episodes on fans and mini trees and trees, stuff like that, and we've talked about that ages ago. So this isn't, a new thing. But for those of you that are just learning Lychee, you probably don't know this technique, and it can save you resin and time because you're not using full supports on everything when you are making use of the ones you are using, meaning I can use a bigger one, I can use a 0.28, and then I can stem a bunch of minis to it, and it'll be pretty strong. It's going to work pretty well. So, here for example, we take one, put it in the palm of the hand, and then I go over here to the mediums, and then I'm going to go, okay, I'm going to connect you, and you, and you, and you, and I'm going to go across here, and then we're going to look over here. So, again, similar thing. And you see how you can support things using a more minimalistic approach, but still being able to support the details you need to support and keep the intricate model supported the way it needs to be. Now, again, this is a big model. Some of these islands are huge. I mean, look at this. You could technically put a very large anchor here at the bottom. I would even say a 30 would be fine, just because of the fact this thing is heavy, it's big, and I think you're going to need the extra support. So I would actually place a little cluster of heavier supports like right there at the edge of the axe, and then one in the corners. And that will be a big help there at your starting point. So you can see I'm not really super concerned with delicate here because these parts are all pretty big. I mean, these teeth are kind of delicate. These are definitely more along the lines of I don't want to break them. So what I would do here is I would more than likely build a support system where I'm able to come up here with maybe like 22 or a 20, and that would just be for the teeth part. And I would probably do like one support from one side and one support from the other, like that. So there's one support holding each side of the tooth. You could then even add a couple extra supports here along the front of the tooth, like that, to make sure that it's getting enough support. And that should be good for that tooth. Now, again, you'd have to repeat that process for each one of the teeth. You also have these little rope bits down here. You have to. I mean, there's a lot of islands. You see what I mean about delicate, like intricate. Intricate doesn't even begin to describe the level of the amount of islands that you're actually having to support with models like this. Now, again, on the feet, you're going to want to use heavy stuff. So we're going to go to probably our threes, and we're going to use those because on the feet, you really want these anchors to really hold the model down. So I'm going to put all those islands need to have some of the strongest supports that we're going to use are going to be facing down towards the bottom like this. And no, they're not going to be easy to remove. These are definitely going to be ones you're going to have to clip. Maybe. I mean, you could pull them, but you might do damage. You might pop a hole or something like that. So definitely don't go crazy with that. But that's the idea. You want to use heavier stuff towards the bottom. You want to use lighter stuff towards the top, unless it has a long way to travel, like this one, for example. You want to use fans wherever you can get them into these little tiny spots. So you only have to use maybe one big support, like Here, for example, we'd use like one, and then you would simply attach trees to allow better supports along the way. And even if you're using something heavier, you only have to place one heavy piece, and then you're able to place three minis, and those are going to cause a lot less problems along in the long run. But that is pretty much the gist of doing delicate, intricate, and otherwise, I guess, a mini, because pretty much most minis are either on the delicate or the intricate side, or both. And I think that's what makes them such a challenging thing sometimes. People get into this, and this is one of the things they want to make. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of people who get into resin printing definitely get into it because they want to make minis. Maybe they want to do tabletop gaming. Maybe they're like me and they want to do this professionally because they're crazy. Maybe they want to make big figures and models. I mean, I got into it because I was honestly just curious about making models. I was a model maker. I love doing modeling stuff. This was just another way to get into it, and I kind of exploded into it after that. But honestly, I never thought it would be the kind of rabbit hole that it is. So I do warn anybody that does jump into it for the first time, you are going to find yourself going, man, how long have I been doing this? But it does have its fun moments. It does have its frustrations. And I hope you have some fun times and good luck printing. And I hope this episode of the Lychee Slicer Basics was fun and educational for everyone. And I hope you guys have a great and happy holiday and have a good new year. We'll see y'all again real soon.